Good morning, everyone. I am Julie Rowine, the president of the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle. On behalf of our league, I'd like to welcome you all to this latest program in our First Friday series. Our next First Friday will be on May 8th, when the topic will be the open meeting law. This morning, we're going to hear about Concord's information technology security from two very interesting speakers. Since our founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has worked to foster civic engagement and enhance access to voting. The League is a nonpartisan organization and does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. The program this morning is being recorded and will be available on our website and through Minuteman Media. And I will now turn the meeting over to Diane Proctor, who is the chair of our Concord Town Government Committee, which organizes this First Friday series. Diane?
Thank you, Julie. My name is Diane Proctor, and I am the chair of the Town Government Committee. I want to welcome everybody who's here. We are being recorded, so if you don't want your face in all of this, all you have to do is to do this. Watch. Push that little icon and turn off. Now, and if you don't want your name to appear, then you go up and you change your name in the screen, so that there are people who prefer that and just wanted to alert you to that. As well, we ask everybody to mute during the presentation. Questions emerge for you in the chat box, and Carlin Reed once again is going to be monitoring that chat box and will summarize your questions and present them to the speakers once their presentation is completed. We are really lucky to have the two people who know an awful lot about the town of Concord. We have Stephen Crane, our town manager, and we have Jason Bulger, who is our new Chief Information Officer, to present to us the whole complexity of IT, from broadband to 5G to all of the questions that are going to be, I think, central to how we move forward as a town and as a community. And community is the key word there, isn't it? It's how we communicate with each other. Because I am absolutely ignorant about IT. Our former president of the league and someone who knows a great deal is going to be moderating this program for us. Cynthia Rainey started her career in DC at the International Trade Commission. She then moved to Boston and worked for high-tech technology magazines. She worked for software startups, and then she worked for Lotus Software and IBM. She is currently working for the Harvard Public Schools in IT. I can think of no one more suited to moderate this program. Cynthia Rainey, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Diane. I'm very excited about our conversation today with the town manager and our new Chief Information Officer. So I believe they have a presentation to get us started, and I look forward to people typing into the chat to ask them questions after they complete their presentation. So welcome, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Diane, for the introduction, and Julie as well. Good to see everyone here. Thank you for having us here at the First Friday on the second Friday. And I'm Stephen Crane, I'm the town manager, and I think we were talking a little bit before the start of the session about technology. And Diane, the word you used was community, and I think that's important because it's not just how we communicate with each other, but it's how we also connect with each other. And something that I think Jason Bulger, our Chief Information Officer, will touch on is how truly interconnected we all are through technology, not just in Concord, but globally. And that is something that is really both a tremendous benefit and opportunity, but also the source of a lot of risk and a source of I guess, anxiety or fearfulness, because I think that there's so many uncertainties. And like I said, Jason, I think is going to touch on those. And I think about, the town of Concord has made a lot of investments in our cybersecurity, our information technology, our resources. We've made investments both internally in terms of how we operate as an organization, but also how people can access us, how the community can access us. As was mentioned, that this is being recorded and being posted on MMN, which has almost endless archive of meetings and sessions. And so if people really want to go back and see, if you missed a meeting, you can see the whole thing on YouTube through MMN. I mean, it's mind blowing how much information there is out there. We have a town website that is almost like a bit of an iceberg. We'll talk about that in a little bit, where there's a small amount of information that leads you to, again, almost infinite amounts of information about the town. I think one of the things, we were talking about Zoom a little bit before we started, and if there's an example of really technology in our lives and how rapidly things are changing, for me anyway, I think Zoom is just a perfect illustration. I commented about a year ago, I think for the first time, that, for 300 years, Concord didn't do any municipal business on Zoom, and then we were doing it every single day. And it's like, what does that mean? How have we adapted? What has that done to the operations of our boards and committees? What has it done to our municipal operations? How has it allowed us to develop connections or maintain connections? How has it worked in terms of security protocols? I think, a year ago when we decided to go to Zoom, there were public questions about the security of the Zoom system. There were Zoom bombing, was a thing. I had never heard of Zoom, and 5 minutes after I heard about it, I heard about Zoom bombing. And so early on, we took a very deliberate approach into how we rolled out Zoom and did our essential municipal business on it. And over time, as we learned more and made more investments, we were able to open up Zoom to now where we are doing it, like I said, every day without even hardly a moment's thought. And I will say that I don't want to jinx myself, but a year on, I think every board and committee is back to full business. Our network has remained secure, and I'm not aware of any Zoom bombing instances in Concord at any board or committee. From a stranger. There's been plenty of oops moments from people who are boards, but they were supposed to be there. It just was, one of those things. But I think that the approach we took early on really paid off. And so now looking ahead, what's the future of sessions like this for Concord? At some point in time in the near future, we will be going back to meeting in person. And so one of the things that I've tried to engage our legislative delegation and the state association, the Massachusetts Municipal Association, is trying to get the legislature and the governor to create a way for us to do both, to meet in person and have the opportunity to fully participate via a remote platform for people who maybe it isn't as easy to get out and get to a meeting. One of the things I've observed is that participation is a lot higher has been a lot higher during COVID-19 because of the use of Zoom, where if for a select board meeting, and I see Terry Ackerman's here, hopefully she'd back me up on this, but at a select board meeting, in the select board meeting room, if you got 10 people from the public to attend, it was crowded in that room, and people had to crawl over each other to get into seats at the back of the room. Now we'll get 30 or 40 people, depending on the issue, at a select board meeting, and everybody is in the comfort of their own home, maybe wearing shoes, maybe not wearing shoes, and able to participate, in the discussion. And so that's something that I think has really been an eye opener for me, and something that we really want to continue. And so now that we're coming out of a pandemic, what have we learned about technology? How have our views of how we use it changed? And how can we now create, and I was teasing Cynthia earlier, I didn't want to use the word hybrid model because of the connotation was anybody who's parenting kids at home is like, hybrid model, But I think that that's something we really want to try and do, because I see the benefits now of allowing remote participation. And I also see the benefits of in-person meeting. I think one of the things that I've said is Zoom has been useful for maintaining relationships, but it isn't that good in developing relationships. And so that's something that I think, as I wasn't here all that long before the pandemic hit. And so there was a lot of relationships I really haven't gotten the opportunity to develop. And so as a relatively new manager in the community, it's been a really lost opportunity for me to get out and meet people in the community. And now, so going forward, I think that technology is going to allow us to maintain connections and, heaven willing, we will be able to get back to meeting new people and either reconnecting or connecting new. So in terms of the town's use of technology, Jason's would be much better at talking about both the breadth and the depth of the town's technology profile. It is significant, from cell phones to computers, radio systems. We have these things called SCADA systems that monitor our water and wastewater systems. We've got a million software platforms for various uses, whether it's GIS or, MyRec, my senior center. There's so many different things. And all of these things share one common component, and that is they have an end user. And if those end users aren't being careful, it can cause problems for all of it. And that's something I think Jason's going to talk a little more detail on. So I will just leave it at that for now and turn it over to Jason to kind of give you the actual information about our technology.
Thank you, Stephen. That was a good introduction. And one thing that you said stuck out for me when you talk about the deliberative nature of how we approached technology. I think that I've found in my short time here in Concord that I'm really lucky to have found a community and a workplace and leaders that are so deliberative with the way that they do things and the approach that they take to embracing new technology, and really, making a choice that's good for the town and the organization as a whole, and thinking about the complexities and the nuances of some of these technological decisions. Because as you pointed out, we know now what the risks are with technology, and that we need to approach those decisions with that in mind so that we can mitigate those risks where possible. And ultimately, that's what cybersecurity is. It's understanding the risk and doing what you can to mitigate it. We all know that we want to participate in the digital world to some degree. Some people want to bank online, other people just need to get information online, but we know we are going to have some interaction with it, and we need to understand where our liabilities are and then what we can do to sort of minimize those where we can. And of course, a lot of that, when we're putting our eggs in the baskets of third parties or corporations, it's hard to know what you can do to trust that organization or what you can do to protect yourself when you don't really hold the card. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but mostly I'm going to focus on Concord's technology and security right now, where we are, how we know where we are, and where we hope to go and what we're doing right now to get there. So with that, I will start sharing my screen. And if you can just nod if you can see the screen now. Okay. So let me just get my little window up so I can control the presentation. So I'm relatively new here to the organization. I started in November of 2020. And the question I get asked a lot by people is, how do you even know where Concord is security-wise, or how does anybody know where they are? And, when you first walk through the door, you see clues everywhere. And an example of that would be, look at the budget for an organization. A lot of enterprises now are putting a dedicated line item for cybersecurity because they understand that cybersecurity risk is a business risk today. Almost every transaction that we do in some way is affected or goes through a computer system. If that system or that network is offline, it's going to affect the business operations. So, where are we spending money on software, on training, on firewalls? How is the organization spend? And then look at the users' behaviors. Are they bringing in thumb drives or equipment from home? Are they checking with the IT department before they make strategic software or hardware decisions? Are they trying to create shadow IT, which can be a liability if they are, making decisions on behalf of the organization on their level, not realizing how interconnected we all are? The most important thing you can do, though, to really assess the cybersecurity posture for any organization or yourself really, is to use the cybersecurity framework. So what is a cybersecurity framework? Well, a cybersecurity framework is actually, I'm going to go back to that slide. It's a series of documents that define controls and allow an organization to manage its cybersecurity risk. There are many common ones, COBIT or ISO 27K. There's a lot of acronyms that float out there, but the gold standard for cybersecurity frameworks is the Nist cybersecurity framework. So Nist is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, which the government issues a lot of guidance on various systems and protocols. And CSF stands for Cybersecurity Framework. These controls are a series of 5 functions, which are pictured in that nice little graphic, starting with identify and going clockwise around. And they include categories and subcategories. Those subcategories, which I'll give an example of in a little bit, are actionable controls that an organization can do to make sure they're protected in a particular area. And then within those subcategories, there's also implementation tiers. So for example, if one of your goals is to provide cybersecurity awareness training for your end users, you can imagine that one organization might have a piece of paper that they hand a new employee when they walk through the door, and they consider themselves as checking that box. That's probably kind of not a very mature level of implementation. Another organization could have a formal hour-long training that's followed up with a questionnaire or some sort of quiz. They might document it and have the user sign off when they've completed a series of trainings or whatever, and they might be tracked annually. So that might be a more mature model. So even if you can check a box, you want to make sure that you have a way to repeatably follow these categories and subcategories. So here's an example. A function might be identify, and identify really is looking at your organization and making sure that you have eyes on everything. One of the categories in identify is asset management. We know that that's really important to be able to protect the things on your network. You have to know what those things are. And a subcategory within that would be that physical devices and systems within the organization are inventoried. Sounds pretty simple, but as I mentioned, some people may have a spreadsheet that they update once a year when they buy computers. Other people have, dynamic asset management systems that can scan the network and alert you anytime something pops up and produce, inventory reports or warranty reports or age reports. So there's different levels of compliance with these controls and standards. So then the next question is, so how do you actually perform an assessment like that? And then how do you make sure that you're improving on that over time? So we participated in 2020 in the National Cybersecurity Review, which is a program put out by the Department of Homeland Security that allows state and local governments to report anonymously their cybersecurity posture so that the government has a good idea of where these organizations are in terms of their compliance with these controls. So this is something that Concord is going to participate in annually now, and it's going to allow us to track our compliance year over year to see what benchmarks we had to make clear, concrete goals for what we hope to accomplish in the next year, and then identify, if there's any budgetary impact on those or operational impacts, and make sure that those goals are aligned with our business interests and objectives for that year. And then year over year, as I said, we can distill that into a report that shows our level of compliance with all those categories and subcategories. It's not really enough to just bring in a third party for a couple hours to say, are we secure? Or to have somebody like me say, well, this place looks pretty good with what I've seen before. You really want objective and actionable ways to track your compliance with these standards. And these work for Fortune 50 companies, and they'll work for the town of Concord. In addition to this, in addition to trying to create those benchmarks and then annually improve on them year over year, what else are we doing to improve cybersecurity? Here's a couple initiatives that we've got going already. The first one is cybersecurity awareness training on your left here, and you can see a criminal trying to phish somebody. As Stephen mentioned, the front line in cybersecurity are our end users. It's impossible for us to deploy antivirus, anti-malware, firewalls to truly protect users against every threat that they're going to encounter. So we really need to make sure that they have the latest technology training and awareness and understanding of what the criminals and bad people are out there trying to do and what types of attacks they can expect to see, and also what the best practices are in terms of protecting themselves, both personally and in the workplace. We've seen time and time again that users compromised at home can have an impact in the workplace. If you have a laptop that connects to a VPN, a virtual private network, into the office, if you have a mobile phone that maybe has your work account added to it, technology now crosses these lines into people's personal lives. So we want to see people have these good cyber skills both in the workplace but also at home. And that's also a good motivation to get them to buy into that, because they know that this is not just going to protect them in the office where they maybe might not see the benefit personally, but it's also going to come home with them and give them better cyber skills to make sure that their bank accounts are more secure, or their web surfing or their social media profiles are a little bit more secure. So the same lessons that they're learning in the cybersecurity awareness training are going to apply to their personal lives as well. Next is Office 365, and I did mention this project in detail at a presentation of the Select Board recently. I'm really happy to say that this project is moving along well, and we've migrated about 10 users in a pilot program to see how it would go, and it's going really well. So what Office 365 is basically cloud-based platform for our email and file servers. So traditionally, organizations, as they grew to the size of needing shared file storage and communication tools, have used on-premises servers that are here in our server room to house software that allows people to communicate via email or allows them to share files. And that model worked really well for a long period of time, but we have seen for a long time now some of the drawbacks of that. First of all, you need to really have a 24/7 operation, because we, as you know, provide support and email for dispatchers that operate 24/7, EMTs, firefighters, and the rest of the town that really can't go without this essential communication. So that means that these services that maybe once when they first were adopted were nice to have are now essential and need to really be up 24/7. That means that every time we do an update, which can take between 2 and 4 hours, our users have to find alternatives to those communication tools. And updates in one area can have implications in other areas. If we need to update this one server that has nothing to do with email, it still might affect users' ability to connect to the network that allows them to get to their email. So you have to look at how everything is connected. In addition to just uptime and resilience, we also have security, which it means us monthly taking these systems down to make sure they're patched. Or as many of you might have heard, in February, there was a huge Microsoft Exchange vulnerability that was published. And that is the email server that we use on site. We had to scramble to make sure that everything was secure and locked down. Fortunately, all of our scans and mitigation efforts have proved to come back in the clear for us. So we did not suffer an incident as a result of that, but many organizations and many municipalities did. So there's the security, and then there's the availability. Users need to be connected to our network to access a lot of these tools. But in today's COVID world and in remote work with Zoom meetings, people need access to those files on their phones and on their computers, their laptops, and at home. So how do we do that? Office 365 solves all of those problems for us. It increases the availability, it increases the uptime and the resilience of those services, and it even adds new services like instant messaging or other collaboration and communication tools. We'll now have access to planning software and project management software, group-based project software like Teams, where you can do collaboration, communication, chat, video conferencing, all of that in one profile. We also adopted Zoom big time, but it was only about 20 to 30 people that have Zoom licenses that can host meetings more than 2 people or more than 40 minutes. So this is going to allow everyone in the organization to have video conferencing and be more productive when we have these COVID times. In addition to that, we also did a network audit. Concord, as you can imagine, with how many different buildings that we have a very complex network. We have fiber that runs all around town. Some of that fiber is utilized just by the town, and some of it is used in the broadband initiative. We need to make sure that everybody is as secure as possible. And I think that the town historically has done a really good job at protecting the broadband side and the town side. But even within the town side alone, we have all these different buildings, and we have a need to make sure that computers and users can only have access to what they actually need to have access to. There's a principle of the least privilege. You don't want people to be able to do things that they have no need to be doing or that isn't in their job description. So we need to make sure that if you are in the dispatch center, you can't have access to public works files if you have no need to have those files, for instance. So, finding the right access control limits on these things is a balancing act, but it's something that we need to do to make sure that we isolate these networks and that we protect them the best that we can. Inventory, which you heard me mention as an example, is another huge area that we are improving on. We need to know what's on our network so that we can protect it and so that we can identify it when things change. People bring personal devices and connect to the public Wi-Fi, and hopefully that's an isolated network and you don't have to worry about that. But new things pop up. A consultant comes in to provide support for a department, and then they plug something into a network jack. You want to know when that happens. You want to be notified and make sure that they have access to the things that they should have access to, and no more. But you also want to make sure that you can provide reports at any given time for the age of your devices, so that you're staying on top of updates that need to happen. Concord historically had a patchwork of inventory systems. We had some systems over here in a spreadsheet. We had some systems maintained by our managed service provider who assists us with our IT support. We had some tools that scan just servers, but not end user workstations. So what we've done is we've centralized all that into a single pane of glass. So we have one place now where we can go for the de facto standard for our inventory. So next, I'm going to kick it back to Stephen just to give an update on the hard drive incident. We knew that this was going to likely be a question on the minds of people. So Stephen, I'll let you talk a little bit about this. And I've got a slide that talks kind of about the costs, both monetary and otherwise, but feel free to.
Go ahead and pop that up, Jason. I think so. As many of you know, in October of 2019, early as a part of swap off drop off at the CPW yard, over 100 hard drives from our IT department were removed improperly, and we learned that they likely had personal information on them and were not adequately protected, nor were they monitored when they were dropped off. And so even though we didn't know where specifically the hard drives ended up, and I will tell you that to this day, we still don't, it was clear that it amounted to a data breach. And so we immediately began treating the situation as a data breach. And I think when we talk about the town's approach to technology, one of the things is a difficult lesson to learn. And sometimes in life we do this where you don't think about, how to respond to emergency until you're in one. And what we realized was that our protocols and systems for really protecting information weren't really where they needed to be. And so right away, we implemented a few protocols to help protect that. We changed our system for destroying hard drives. In fact, we bought a hard drive shredder because that's why they were at CPW. We had a shredding vendor, and we thought it's a relatively small amount of money, comparatively speaking, to have our own. So we did purchase one. And the town fortunately had cyber threat insurance, and so we had to file a claim and go through all that, and that started a process of we had to the insurance company helped us retain a third-party vendor that basically did a forensic analysis of the information on the hard drives. And we basically did that by taking all the hard drives came out of town computers. So we backed up all the ones that we thought they came from. And that has added up to about 70,000 individual notifications that either have or need to go out as a part of our response to the data breach. Every state has laws about notification requirements for people in their state who have had their information either lost or stolen, and we have for a variety of reasons, the town of Concord has a large number of names, addresses, things like that from people all over the country. We get a lot of visitors, and so we had a lot of information. And so once part of that notification requirement is the town is obligated, I think in just about every case, to provide identity theft protection, which means we would pay if someone gets the notice they want to sign up for identity theft protection. The town has to pay for that subscription for 12, 18, 24 months. And so, we've had a fair number of people who have signed up for that as well. And, one of the things, like I said, is really it's been so when Jason came on board last November, we were still really dealing with the outfall of this incident. And Jason's approach that he has just laid out has really helped provide better security for our information, better processes for not having to be in the situation we were just in, and better ways to really make sure that we make it a habit to be careful and protect our information. And, I think, one of the things that people probably need to bear in mind, and Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but, there's two kinds of people: those who have been victims of a data breach and those who have not yet been victims of a data breach. I mean, if you have shopped online, your information has probably been breached at some point in time. I remember right as this incident, as our hard drive incident was happening and we were going through our first wave of notifications, I got one in the mail from something completely not affiliated with the town of Concord at all. And it just goes to show you how far ahead of most organizations people who perpetrate online crime are. I mean, in many cases, they're far ahead of most big companies. And that's why, like I said, our new approach of being proactive and staying ahead of cyber criminals and testing our defenses, if you will, annually is really an important part of our operation now that we need to sustain going forward, because it was not only costly, it certainly was costly for the insurance company, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost in dealing with this, with our specific situation, which will obviously cost the town more as we continue to purchase insurance, but also costly for individuals in terms of time and convenience, and the amount of time that I have had to spend and other town staff members have had to spend responding to the loss of the hard drives. I don't even think I could quantify the number of hours and staff time, which that time belongs to all the taxpayers of Concord. And a significant amount of it was consumed with this incident. And so, I don't want to say never again, because it could always happen, especially with the vulnerability at the end user level. But we have really radically changed how we go about it. And so we want to make sure Concord, people here at the meeting and those who hopefully will view this later know that we've learned our lesson and we take it very, very seriously now.
Yeah, and this is also what I get from Concord's response and from Stephen so openly talking about the situation, is that it's not something that we want to sweep under the rug and pretend never happened. It was definitely a learning experience, and it's something that we will, protect against every day. And I think it also really reinforces the idea of what a cost for something really is, because sometimes I personally have gone to an executive and said, I'd like to do this thing and it's going to cost $10,000. And they say, well, that sounds like a lot of money. I think Concord now knows what a lot of money really is when you look at the risk side of something. And so when you have a risk-based approach to dealing with cybersecurity, you take those costs into consideration, and you can now really internalize what the pain really is when something doesn't go right. So it really puts things into perspective, and can help an organization align their risk with their business practices, and really understand what it fully entails. So
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, finish your sentence. I just want to have another, I have a follow-up.
You go.
So I think one of the things is Nancy James has said, Kroll was one of our vendors. They're a national third party. They operate call centers to help people, ask questions about the situation. And so they manage that kind of customer service interface on issues like this. The one thing I should say is, again, as we sit here today, there is no evidence that there is a case of identity theft connected to the hard drives that went missing from CPW. So I want to make sure that's clear. We've had people in town who have been victims of unemployment scams, false tax returns being filed. Those are scams that are nationwide, if not global in scope, and have been going on for years and really predate the hard drive incident. And so I can't swear that there hasn't been something, but we have no direct evidence that there was anything, or that the hard drives did end up in somebody's hands that used the information on them. But again, we had to treat it as if they were. And as Jason said, shame on us for not doing a better job before then.
So all I was going to say is that I think that might be a good point where we can stop the slides, and we have a couple other slides that are informational if questions come up. But do you think that, Stephen, that's a good stopping point?
Yeah, I think so, Jason. I think I know one of the chat things was asking about VPN. So if people have questions about, he said something and I don't understand what it means. His first slides were all in binary code, and I had to tell him to change all that because no one's gonna be able to read it. So no, I think it's hard to talk because because it is moving so fast and it's so advanced. It really is hard to talk about it without using terminology that may be unfamiliar to people, including me. And we talk about it's cybersecurity and technology, if not weekly, very, very often. And there are things that I'm like, what does that even mean? How does that even work? So if you have questions like that, there are no silly questions about words or technology or information used. So fire away.
Yeah. So Cynthia, do you want me to answer some of the questions in the chat before we go to the other questions that were submitted, or how would you like me to handle it?
So I'll start off with a few questions, and then we'll shift to using the chat.
Okay.
So shifting gears a little bit, can either of you talk to us briefly about where we are with 5G? And maybe you could explain a little bit about what that is for people who do not know.
Well, Jason, if you can explain what 5G is, I can tell you where we are with it.
5G is just the next generation of cellular communication. It operates on a higher frequency, which means it can provide faster data, but it also means it cannot go as far as 4G signals can go.
And so what happens is in communities, the deployment of 5G is on light poles, antennas. They're smaller sized antennas. Instead of having a giant tower, which I will share, I think if you've been watching select board meetings, we have been reporting on an effort that we're engaged in to try and construct a cell tower somewhere near the downtown because of the issues we have with cell service, which we already knew we had a problem, but during COVID-19, it was really exposed by some of the struggles some of our downtown businesses had. So that's something we're working on separate and apart from 5G. But 5G antenna, I don't know, they're maybe a foot or two tall, and they get mounted on poles and things like that. A lot of communities have started to develop 5G policies that regulate, where they can go, what do they look like. Cynthia, as you know, the FCC has a rule that says when you're going through the permitting and approval process, you can't talk about public health. And I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't happy with that rule, but it's our obligation at the local level to follow that because there's consequences if you use public health as a reason to not, issue a granted location or a permit or something like that. So we are actively working with town council on framing out a 5G policy for Concord. I know a number of communities have worked on them. Not all of them have been adopted. Burlington had one of the early ones, but there was a window of time that Burlington's policy was developed and that under FCC rules, and I think that window closed. So, but the policies that are being developed are a different variation. And so I've talked to the Burlington town manager, and they're really going through kind of their first test of their policy now. And so we're, interested in seeing how that plays out as we develop our own policy. But that's where we stand on that, Cynthia, is we are evaluating policy options. We're fortunate that the town council represents a number of communities around us, Bedford, Lexington, Winchester. And so we have some existing samples of drafts that we're working off of.
Great. It feels like every household and small business needs a CIO now. What strategies and resources are available for town residents and businesses to protect themselves from cyber attacks and identity theft?
Well, you can't have Jason, he's taken. But I think, well, Jason, I'll let you handle this, but I think it's something that, I think, Cynthia, it's an awesome question, because every single person that has a computer or a cell phone, should be asking themselves that question.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend an hour just addressing this topic. I would recommend that people try to limit their exposure to the types of things that they sign up for or use, because the more places that your data exists, the more likely you are to have that data accessed by a third party. There are many tips that you can get. I think I would refer people to identitytheft.gov, which is a place that has resources both to protect yourself from identity theft, but also allows you to report it to the FTC, which is the recommended place to report identity theft to. They do recommend reporting it there and not to your local police department, though I'm sure that the police department would be happy to walk anyone through the process if you reach out to them.
Yeah, the CPD does have some resources on their webpage, especially if you feel like you've been the victim of a scam. Definitely call over. They will take the information. They have, I don't want to say they have a list of cases, but they have a list of people who have been victimized, and they do look into it. Because like I said, these scams are national or global in scope. And so they often partner with other branches of law enforcement at different levels. And the more evidence, if you will, that they can bring to those investigations, the better off their position. So if you feel like you've been victimized, please contact CPD.
And remember that people are trying to sort of get into your digital world where you're not expecting them to. So don't assume that any communication or any sender is safe. One of the goals for a modern enterprise for security is a zero trust network. And that is, it used to be we had a perimeter where you said, okay, now you're in the network, you're safe here. Don't worry about it. Now that we don't need to vet you or authenticate you anymore. We now know that that's a terrible model, because the moment somebody gets in, they have access to everything. So now every service needs to be authenticated separately. I think you can take that same approach to your personal life and say, just because this email came from my friend doesn't mean that you should trust the link that's in there. His or her account could have been compromised. Just because this ad has this name that I recognize doesn't mean you should trust it. So just assume that people who are trying to get into your digital world are going to exploit that, the fact that you are going to want to trust people that you know or places that you know, and just make sure everything passes the smell test, that it doesn't seem fishy to you.
I got an email from my dad 2 weeks ago. It was from his email address, and it said, "I have a favor to ask." And I deleted it because I had actually got the same email from, sadly, Dory Kehoe. I sad for Dory, not that I got an email from Dory, but sadly, it was clear that her email account had been hacked, I think a month or two ago. So I realized that subject line was fraudulent. And so you have to be mindful and kind of track, all right, I think I've seen this before. If you're not, and the other thing is, if you're not sure, if you have the opportunity to pick up the phone and call the person and say, "Hey, did you email me?" So there's, like I said, the criminals are usually ahead of the rest of us.
don't trust and verify. All right, great. I think I'm going to toss it to Carlin if she's ready, because I think we have a lot of participants on, and I hope that there's some good chat questions.
Sure, sounds good. This is Carlin Reed. We've got a couple of questions that have not yet been answered. And again, if you have something, please go ahead and put it in the chat function. We'll add this to the queue. An early one from Peggy is, how do you know that the cloud will actually be secure?
That's a great question. Just because something is cloud-based does not inherently make it more secure. That's true. So, when you look at the cloud, you have a lot of different options. Almost every service now has a cloud-based option in the IT world. So when we look at what we did for Microsoft Office 365, we're in the government community compliance cloud, or the GCC, which means that we are in an area of Microsoft servers that is isolated from all of the rest of their businesses. We're only with state, local, and federal agencies on there. We're also, the people who service or have access to those in Microsoft's company are vetted to a much higher degree in terms of their background checks and citizenship and all these other things. So first of all, the place that we chose is as secure as it can possibly be. And then the second thing is, you're right, you can't just put all your data there and say, well, now it's safe. You have to set things up as best you can. And fortunately, these days, with security on everyone's minds, they give you a lot of tools that allow you to create multi-factor authentication, which means that when you log into your account, you're going to get a message on your phone that says, hey, are you logging into your account? So before you can even get in, you have to have your phone on your person. If you don't, you're not going to get into the account. It also has conditional access. So it will look at where you're logging in. Well, if you just logged in from Concord and then 10 minutes later you tried to log in from LA, we have a problem. Like, that same user could not possibly have gone from one place to the other in that period of time. So it has features like that where it can detect based on what you're doing or where you're logging in or when you're logging in, and it can flag something as suspicious. There's a whole protocol when you onboard that they walk you through to find the best practices, what they recommend and what they see for the highest security that you can possibly achieve. So absolutely, cloud does not equal security, but cloud done well with an operation center that's maintained and updated daily is going to be more secure than something that's on site, maintained, updated monthly or biannually.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question comes from Julie. What is the impact of Internet of the Things on our security profile, IoT?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, IoT has been around for quite a while. These are things like smart thermometers, Ring doorbells, security cameras. Now they've got smart fridges and microwaves. Anything that is connecting to your network and it's a device, a thing that you use is an IoT or Internet of Things device. The town does come across these. We do have people who have a use case and they see a simple consumer solution like this and that they want to adopt it. We try to make sure that that is the last possible solution, just because the security level of those devices is usually not on par with what an enterprise usually requires. And if it really is the right device, the right price and the right features, and we need to integrate it, then we just have to find a way to do it as securely as possible. So let's make sure it's on the public guest internet, not on an area where it can access the network. Let's make sure that it has a secure password that's not the default password. Let's make sure that it gets updated on a regular basis. And let's make sure that we document it, we're aware that it exists so that we know when we're doing our audits that it's there, that we keep track of it, and that it's replaced at a regular interval.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Thanks, Jason. Here's a question from Linda. The SolarWinds hack. What is it, and was Concord impacted by the SolarWinds hack? Thanks.
Sure. So we were not impacted by the SolarWinds hack. SolarWinds is a software company based in Texas that they make a lot of different types of software, but the type of software that was affected was a network monitoring software. It was software that you can put on your network to look at all the different devices that you have, look at the configurations, look at the security settings, and sort of adjust them all from one place. It's a very high risk solution because it has passwords to all of your devices. So if that software itself becomes compromised, then a hacker could get into every single device in your network. This was a very unique hack. That's part of the reason why a lot of people in the public heard about it, in that as the software developers make software, they develop that software in a very secure environment so they can make sure that no hackers can get into it. But then obviously they need to release it to the public and they need to have different versions. So they transfer that software to different servers. One of those servers in the chain was compromised, we think now, by Russian hackers. And what it allowed them to do was modify the source code so that the actual legitimate software that people were buying and downloading from this vendor was already infected by the time they installed it on their network. So that was a unique and brazen hack for that reason. And it did compromise a lot of companies. It seems as though they really only went after a smaller subset of all the people that were compromised because they were looking for specific companies. And their goal really was to continue to do this down the chain. But Concord did not use the software that was impacted by SolarWinds, so we were not affected by that hack.
That sounds like a pretty sophisticated approach.
Yes.
All right, next question. This is from Peggy. Will the new smart electric meters interface with the town's network infrastructure, or will they only be through the light plant infrastructure? And of course, I think you can see the follow-up question is, okay, how does that impact cybersecurity for the town?
Stephen, do you want to address this as the chief executive of the light plant, or do you want me to talk about the technology piece of it?
You should probably talk about the technology piece.
I'm hesitant to say too much because the new smart meters process has really just begun. The light plant has just awarded a contract to a consultant that will help them put together an RFP. So we do not yet know what types of devices or limitations that they will have in terms of what they connect to. I can tell you that from the vendors that we've seen in the market, it's very rare for a town to have 100% broadband connection to every house. So most of the manufacturers that make these smart meters don't allow for a direct connection into those homes. They usually use a wireless signal that either daisy chains from one to another, or is picked up by a vehicle, or it goes, centrally through cellular modems, and then is transferred back to the light plant that way. So the vendors that we're seeing, we're not aware of too many that do that, but all I can say is that right now it's very early in the process. So I don't think that there's a concern yet for merging people's home broadband with those smart meters, and any concern of cross contamination between the two networks.
Okay, was there any follow-up from Stephen?
No, I think
let him go first.
Yeah, no, I think Jason's right. We are still working on that, and I think Jason talked about the IoTs, and I think, is it fair to say, Jason, that a smart meter is kind of like an IoT, and so all of the protocols that Jason detailed for you about the types of devices, I think will be naturally baked into whatever smart meter ends up getting deployed here.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, all right. How informed, or how does the town inform the select board on cybersecurity matters, given that some of the matters may be considered confidential or at least sensitive, but others will not? How do you choose what to tell the select board what's going on?
So, as Jason mentioned, he gave a presentation on the Office 365 conversion at a public meeting. You can go, I don't remember the date, but you can go back and watch that. It was a good presentation. There are issues that we talk about publicly. I have a town manager's report. I will put stuff in there. There are things that when I report to the select board, and this happened a few times during the hard drive situation where, for security reasons, we couldn't talk about a lot of the issues. And honestly, there are questions that I'm sure are going to come up here that we really can't give very specific answers to, specifically because of security, because this meeting is recorded, and someone who wants to do the town harm could eventually watch it and, pick up on something we're saying and use it as a gateway. So we try and communicate as much as we can, as much information as we can, as quickly as we can. But there are things that we just may have to say that we can't communicate. There are things that can be discussed in executive session, but sometimes there are things that are not eligible for executive session. So that's the other part of this that we have to balance out. But I do my best to keep the board informed of where things are going from a technology standpoint. And obviously, if we had when we did have an incident, we reported as fully and as promptly as we could.
Okay, thank you. All right, this question comes from Stefan. Related to device use, although not exclusively on data security, has the town run into issues with union contracts or human resources, HR standards, when employees use their personal phone for two-factor authentication or remote usage and work from home? So in other words, issues with union contracts.
Not that I'm aware of. It's not every town employee is given a town phone. And so I don't know if Stefan wants to explain what he means there, but those types of things are usually governed by a policy that we have. If it's public safety, they have policies and procedures for just about everything. And so those aren't in the union contract. Those are department procedures, but nothing that I can think of. Certain working conditions are, management rights. So I don't know if I'm answering that right, Stefan.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not looking to stir up trouble. I was just curious if someone's working from home, how does that work if they using their home computer and they need a two-factor authentication that goes to their cell phone? I presume we're not giving every employee who's not coming into the office every day a way to do that with town equipment, or are we? I guess that's my question. I understand it better. So whether you're in a union or not, if you have a need for telework and you have the ability to do it, our first preference is to issue you a town computer. We have purchased as a result of COVID-19 and through CARES Act, we purchased a large number of devices so people would not have to use their personal devices and get into and Jason has to explain what VPN is, but VPN is, I don't know what the initials are, but it's basically a gateway into our server that does require two-factor authentication, but basically means that you can work from home as if you're sitting at your desktop for me at a townhouse. So I'll give you my example, Stefan. I have a town laptop that I take home with me every night and I use on my home network. But I also have an app on my phone for two-factor authentication. So to log in, I need to use both. So I think, and that's where, that's where the training of don't have personal email on my town computer. Don't click on links on my emails that I get that I don't recognize and take care of that so we can protect our network. I don't know, Jason, if there's more you want to add to that.
No, I think that's good. I think that, it used to be text messages that were sent. There was sometimes a very small concern that text messages could cost people money to receive, but the modern authenticators use a push notification where you just have to click approve. So there's no cost to the employee. Usually they're at home when they're doing it, so they're already on their own Wi-Fi. So there's no additional cost to them.
Great. Okay, I've got a question from Diane. Let's go back to the 5G discussion and the public health comment that was made earlier. There are many folks who don't want smart meters on their homes and are concerned about the health effects of Wi-Fi. Could you explain what you meant by the public health aspect?
Well, generally, and I say often that I was a science major, but it was political science. So questions like this can get me out of my depth fairly quickly, but there is, I would say, differing views of the impact of radio frequencies of RF on people. I think I would say broadly that the FCC views it as not a health threat, and there are others who view it as a health threat. And so I think the rule for the FCC is in decision making as to whether or not you should deploy certain types of wireless technology, should you consider the impacts on people's health of radio frequencies of RF? And FCC says, no, you should not consider that. That's my rudimentary understanding of that, Jason. Hopefully you can do better than that answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in general, we look to the guidance issued from the federal and state governments on these things, on what's safe. But I think when you were talking, I think, Stephen, it goes back to your comment where you had made, if somebody doesn't want a tower because of public health, they have to justify it more strongly or something to that effect. I think that they were just clarifying, like, what would those public health implications be? So I think, again, the carriers, AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, and others, they're not going to put signals on there that are not approved by the FCC and you know, more broadly by other health organizations in the United States and worldwide.
Yeah, and I think the prohibition is on even discussing it. I mean, the FCC has really basically said we're the arbiters of what level of radio frequency is safe, not local planning boards. And that stuff is way above Jason's and my pay grade. But that's basically giving you the summary of how I understand federal policy.
I think if you look at the U.S. District Court of Appeals, you'll find a case that's now pending before them involving radio frequencies and whether or not it's to be considered in certain licensing. That's one of the cases. I think it involves the Children's Health Defense versus the FCC.
Yep.
That's just my personal side note. Okay, going back to the actual chats.
Well, anyway, it's just one point on RF though. I've seen a graphic that shows the level of radio waves, radio frequency emissions, like for a smartphone versus a smart meter versus TV or something like that. And comparatively speaking, it's if you're on your cell phone, it's a much higher dose of RF than a smart meter. And I think that's something we try and keep in perspective as we roll out our smart meter plan.
Got it. Okay. Does using, this is a question from Peggy, and Diane and Cynthia, I don't know if you want me to continue on with these chat questions, but I'm getting towards the end here. This is about the last one that I have. Okay. This is from Peggy, will using Office 365 make it less expensive for the town to respond to FOIA requests or public record requests from town citizens?
Well, in terms of expense, a lot of times we get records requests, the state says up to $25 per hour. And a lot of times the requests we get have to be reviewed by staff, most of whom make more than $25 an hour. So will we have somebody who makes less than $25 an hour be able to use 365 to do open records requests? That's probably not going to change. Jason, I think you have identified aspects of Office 365 that may make it easier. And if you want to talk about those, but in terms of the hourly expense, probably not. But in terms of the amount of time taken, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think that every request is different and is going to have a different impact. For example, if you have a very complex request, like I want to see emails between these two organizations, but not these emails, then it might go beyond the limits of what our automatic searches can do, and then humans have to review them. Whereas if it's between, for the month of April, all emails between these two people, again, those are going to be much easier to conduct. And then as Stephen mentioned, if legal counsel needs to review any FOIA, then that's going to add additional time and overhead for that request as well. So it really just depends on that. And, I think we try really hard and do a pretty good job at following all the public records laws and getting back to people as timely as we can with the volume of searches that we get.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to turn this back over to Diane and Cynthia to open up for questions or whatever else you folks want. So thank you, gentlemen. Diane, Cynthia, who's next?
Thank you, Carlin. I'm going to open up the phones. So if you know how to use the virtual hand feature to raise your hand, because I cannot see everybody necessarily, I'd be happy to entertain a question, and I'll wait for a little bit.
Perhaps we can go to gallery view.
That's what I'm in.
Yeah, no, the person controlling all of this rather than spotlighting the speakers. That way, if somebody has a question, they can raise their hand and wave at us.
No questions?
Cynthia, I love how you said you're going to open the phones. I'm just waiting for someone to say, first time, long time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
All right, I have more questions.
okay, go.
All right. Let's just see here.
While you're
That
may
was
I
fun.
ask a question?
What's that?
While you're looking, may I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely, please.
One of the concerns that lots of people have is the obfuscation that they discover when they try to go on the town website and try to get information. We heard this when the select board vote was coming up, and various people were talking about the things they would like to have the select board consider in the future. It's really not an easy platform for citizens to use. Can you speak to us, Jason, about how, since it must be in your oversight or in your area, is there a way for us to collaborate on and talk about how to make that a more effective platform for the citizens of Concord? I mean, let me just give you a very simple example. I'm on a town committee. I wanted to be able to send a note to somebody on my committee to say, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there on Saturday, but I will be doing the following. I didn't have an email for them. I had no way to connect with them. I was told I had to go through a town employee to do that. I mean, that kind of complexity makes being a committee member much harder. Let me give you another example. So I'm sitting and listening to the planning board, and I think, oh, I'd like to speak to the chair of the planning board. Just send them a little note, either thanking them for the meeting or saying, gosh, I wish you would address this. I don't know how to contact them either. There's just a lot that's very difficult. And then there's the question of documents. Where are the documents? How do you get to them? I mean, there's just one barrier after another for citizens. And I wonder how the town is addressing that.
Stephen, do you want to start?
Yeah, no, I'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll be honest with you, Diane, I kind of disagree with you about some of the website. I don't think not being able to find email addresses of volunteers on the website is a failure of the structure of the website. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, you have to view our website as an iceberg. And there are times where navigating to get to the bottom of it may not be self-evident. I completely agree with that. But the analogy I use is, Amazon doesn't have everything it has for sale on its main page. It wouldn't be usable if it did. And so our website is the same way. It's supposed to give you basic upfront information, the most popular things people want, and then click on certain links or certain pages or drop-down menus to get to the next layer of information. And then there's usually links on that next layer to take you to the next layer. It's like peeling it. The website, in most municipal websites are done by Civic Plus, which does ours. And it's peeling an onion, really. And there's tons of information. The one thing I'll say about our website, and all Civic Plus websites, by the way, I had Civic Plus in Long Meadow. I'm sure Jason's dealt with them in other towns too. The search engine on Civic Plus is terrible. I'll be honest with you. When I want to find a document on our website, I Google it. I go to Google and I type in Concord MA, long range plan, and it takes me right to the page. But if I tried that in the search bar on our website, it doesn't take you there. And that's something we don't create that. That's not an optimization at the local level. That's Civic Plus. You could make the case that we should change web vendors, but Civic Plus is ubiquitous for municipal websites. They really are kind of one of the largest vendors that do this. So, that our hands are a little bit tied there. But I think the one thing I want to touch on though, because I don't want to make excuses for Civic Plus. I mean, one thing is people want stuff on the website. And so the amount of content that gets put on there by its very nature is going to make it harder to sift through things. And so you have to balance people wanting everything on the website with everything being on the website. And it's not a needle in a haystack. It's a needle in a stack of other needles that sometimes you're trying to find something. And I think people just have to bear that in mind and have that perspective when they're using the website. I've had issues with it too, but it's just a part of how it's built.
In terms of contacting members of committees, and again, I disagree that that's a failure of the website. I think that that's sort of something that was done to protect usually we don't have enough licenses to give every board and committee volunteer a town email address. And honestly, we would never be able to keep track of who's on, who's off, and changing those email addresses. And so there are people who volunteer who may not want their private email address served, shared. And there's also information about, town content on private board and committee volunteers' computers. Most of the stuff board and committees deal with is public information anyway, so there's not necessarily a threat there. But, we try to offer that protection by having, Terry and I are on the capital planning, and Cynthia's too, capital planning task force, CPTF at Concord MA. That comes in, and then we forward it. The committee members can forward it to each other. Middle school building committee has a centralized email address. We try and use those as a way to make it so people's private email addresses aren't on our website and then available for hackers and people who want to do identity theft and things like that. So it's not just trying to make it convenient for people to email it. There is some level of protection for people's email accounts for reasons that Jason just spent a number of minutes going through. So I just want to separate those two issues.
All right, thank you. I see.
I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Okay.
There was a hand up, but it went down. So.
No. Oh, yes, there's a hand up.
Yes, Nancy Cronin.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was exactly my question about the search function. And it seems that there are many other organizations whose searches work. So I think maybe we should think about finding another source for to be able to do it, because I will put in a question about a current thing that I want to know about. And I go to search and I end up getting a list of 2016, 2015, not the current one. So I think that it needs some attention.
I will point out that on the bottom of every page, there's an email address, and I would highly encourage people who have problems with the website to report them specifically so that we can look into them, because Stephen's right. Sometimes maybe our hands are tied, but other times it really is a small thing that would be a dramatic improvement for a lot of people. So if you can send those comments in, I will say the public information officer who is in the town manager's office does maintain the website, not the IT department. But I work collaboratively with them to make sure that any issues with the website are addressed in terms of speed, functionality, everything like that. So if you know of a problem, let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I don't see anything. Okay, I have a question.
Okay, Cynthia, I have one after you, but you go ahead first.
Okay.
Can I just do a
Put Ann in the queue too.
Can I just do a follow-up to what we're talking about?
Sure.
I haven't been on the website recently, but is there information about how to go about contacting a committee? How to go about, what you should do, or recommendations for how you go about using the search function? If there's something on there that tells people how to do that, you've told us now, but anybody who isn't here at this meeting might not realize that they can ask a question to a committee and it will then be relayed to the chairman of the committee. Just a thought. People need more
Ann, can I answer that?
information. Yeah.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
And again, I want to, if the metaphor is peeling an onion, it's not all just it's not a buffet and not everything is out there. The website just doesn't, not many websites work that way, and ours certainly doesn't. It's drilling down and getting through the layers. I'm pretty sure that every board and committee has its own page on our website. We've got like 60 something boards and committees, and I'll be honest, I haven't pointed and clicked at all of them, but I know by and large they do. And usually on the right-hand side, there's contact information, usually email or phone number. And sometimes it's the committee's email address, sometimes it's town staff, but or a phone number. But there is a way on every committee's page
of contacting them. And on most of those committees pages, they have on the left side menus of things that may be happening or documents that may be affiliated with that particular committee. The bigger the committee, the more drop downs or links you have to go through to get to, say, a specific planning board application or, something like that. The more stuff they deal with, the more layers there are. But if you just, it calls for a little bit of patience. I'll be honest with you. And again, I'm a website user too, and I get frustrated by it. So the fact that you're frustrated by not being able to find something is not an unusual thing or an unacceptable thing. I get frustrated too. But I also know that not everything in cyberspace works the way we think it should. And our Civic Plus website, which is otherwise very, in fact, our website has won awards from the MMA, that state association I talked about. And so, I think there's another side to that story that's very positive.
Cynthia, you've got a question from Tanya?
Yeah, go ahead, Tanya.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I'm not on camera. To follow up on this accessibility of committee members, I remember, first of all, I have a question about why or how is it that email addresses, government email at Concord Mass.gov email addresses for everyone on a committee is hard to get. I mean, I'm sure there's a technical explanation to that, which I don't know about. Because it had been mentioned at an open meeting law related meeting before a few years ago by our town clerk that anyone on a committee could get one. I just want to, and I also don't think that it's a website issue. However, I just want to highlight that sometimes people may want to contact people on committees without necessarily going through town staff or the administrative counterpart of that committee. And I remember when we first moved to town in 2007, there wasn't so much emailing going on as just like phone calls. One could like call a select board member, or in fact, that's what one was encouraged to do if there was a concern. So I just wanted to mention that sort of nuance about when people may or may not want to go through an entire committee or through an administrative counterpart. And then I also put something in the chat about Zoom meetings, but people can read that if they want to. Thank you.
Thank you. That was just a comment? Okay.
There was a question about why are the email address opportunities, governmental email address opportunities limited?
I can speak to that. It's basically a cost issue. If you look at every email address is going to cost a couple $100 a year for us to maintain the licenses for, and you multiply that out for the number of board and committee members, and then the fact that you have how many appointments a year, the overhead for managing that. I think the town in the past has just looked at that as a cost that was very high. But Stephen, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, and that's common. I think most communities have the same thing. There's a limited number of government licenses you can have within the means you have. And I think the thing that to be clear, your email address is private, it's your private account. But if you're getting information related to your committee work that is subject to the open records law, then the information is public. Not if you're using your private email account to do, you're on the Transportation Advisory Committee, for example, and you're using your private email account, not all of your private emails then suddenly become subject to the open record law, but your emails related to your work on the Transportation Advisory Committee certainly do. And so that's something to bear in mind as well. I don't know if everybody, or if I'm saying something too obvious, but that's something to bear in mind as well. It's like if you use your personal cell phone, it's not necessarily all of the content. It's only the content related to the public matter that is subject to that. And like I said, it's pretty common. And the other thing is there's so much turnover that it would be two people's full-time job to just monitor email accounts. And then the other thing is, there are certain boards and committees that do have them. Usually they're regulatory or executive committees. But if everyone had a concordma.gov email address, even a citizen volunteer could use that for, nefarious purposes by posing as a Concord, the town staff person, town officer. And that's another risk that we want to try and limit.
Thanks.
Great.
I saw something from Terry about Zoom meetings, which I did comment something in the chat about. Can I just repeat what I wrote before?
Sure.
Thanks. What I thought about switching to Zoom meetings or making Zoom meetings an equivalent to in-person meetings is that when it was in-person meetings, yes, the public comment was not always required to be made available by the committee, but people would be able to talk to each other, the members of the public. They would be able to pass a flyer, or of course, besides the body language and eye contact and all these other desirables. So if Zoom meetings become an equivalent of in-person meetings, something has to be provided for that opportunity for the public to communicate among themselves, because that was an assumption when the open meeting laws were first created. So that could be through chat, that could be through required public comment, that could be through screen sharing, etc. So that's something I mentioned in the chat. So thank you.
Great. This question is for Jason. What are your cybersecurity and IT priorities for the next 12 months or so?
I think I talked a lot about a lot of them in the presentation. The Office 365 migration is an absolutely huge project, and one that we undertook with the pandemic going on and a lot of people working remotely. It's going really well, but it's going to take a long time. The other network audits, I would say policies and documentation is a huge area where we can improve. We want to have repeatable processes. We want to make sure that if I get hit by a bus, the operations don't ground to a halt. We need to make sure that there's a level of repeatability and oversight in the department so that we can continue to operate. I think that knowing where we are, making those goals to improve our adherence to the cybersecurity framework is a great start for the first year, and that will better position us to make plans for the subsequent years.
Cynthia, I think Terry had her hand up.
Sure, go ahead.
So before we end the meeting, I just wanted to have a chance to see a show of hands. I thought I heard Stephen say that we were working with the state legislature to maybe amend the open meeting law to include Zoom participants and in-person participants. I've been assuming that would be a wonderful thing, that people would like that, but maybe I'm wrong. Could people just raise their hand if you think that you would like to have the option of attending a public meeting either way? That's kind of what I thought. I love it personally. I could be my whatever. So thank you.
Before we started, Terry, we did have that conversation. So my comment about maybe wearing shoes, maybe not, was we were like, we don't have to wear shoes to go to a meeting. And before we get on, like I said, I think participation has been enhanced by this. It's not just jacket, tie, and cargo shorts. It is a much broader reach. And to Tanya's comment, I have noticed people are much more comfortable engaging on a virtual platform than speaking up in a public meeting. I think in terms of, I don't know if Zoom's the cure for fear of public speaking, but I think it has helped a lot of people engage that they wouldn't do if they were sitting in a room full of other people.
Yes, but then you have to allow public comments in committees. I mean, yeah, you require them. I mean, our select board does it, but but they don't have to. Committees don't have to. So that should be included in an amendment to the open meeting law. Thanks.
Looks like you have about 5 more minutes, I think.
Yep. Carla, do you have anything else in the chat?
No, not from the chat.
Okay. Anybody else raising their hand that I'm missing? Okay. I have another question. How are the cybersecurity and IT responsibilities shared across all of our town departments? And that includes CMLP, clerk, finance, recreation, library, water, sewer, police, fire.
School department.
That's my next question, but I'm not going to have time. Yes, and we'll add in the school.
Well, on the school department, can I touch on that? I know you're going to ask that because I think there's interoperability and interconnectivity, and Jason's going to talk about the details of that. But the school department, one of the things, and Cynthia, you know this as a school committee member, Dr. Hunter and I work really closely together at almost every level. We've really forged a really strong partnership. Town and schools do things together that I don't think had not been done in the past, and I'm really proud of that. Being able to develop that relationship. First of all, she's just a great human being, and I enjoy working with her. But it really has enhanced the operations of, I think, both entities. And so, looking to partner on something like IT is a natural extension of that. Except Cynthia, the needs, the platforms, the service demands are so very different that it's hard to find like specific places to plug in. Pun intended on that. So I don't know that there's a natural partnership there or a natural integration between town IT and school IT because those needs and security needs are very specific. But it's not because we aren't willing to partner. If there was, we surely would.
Yeah.
Right, and one thing that sort of jumps out at me is something like printer contracts, which obviously aren't, that could be a big savings if we were to partner with the town. It's just one thing, because I understand the need to have separate systems, obviously, for many reasons, but it might be some mundane things that we could partner with the town on.
Yeah. And we do keep the lines of communication open in IT as well. Stephen mentioned his relationship with Dr. Hunter, but I have the same thing with my cohorts over there in the IT department. And right after I started working here, we had an incident where a vehicle struck a telephone pole or a utility pole where fiber was brought into the school, and we lost internet and connectivity for the school. And it was kind of like me jumping into learning about 5 or 6 different people that I didn't know at the schools and assisting them with that and the response, and also finding a way to improve that system so that there's more resilience and protection even for that specific area. But they were great to work with, and we've had a good relationship since.
Great to see. And then in terms of, are some of our departments sort of, I would call it walled off and separate for?
No, I wouldn't say that. And I think that to Stephen's point initially about the end user is what ties everyone together. We certainly, for security reasons, have different networks in different buildings, but the users and the email systems and the financial systems tie everyone together. So I think that I try to get us as involved as we can with every department so that they know we can support them and protect them, and that they have the tools that they need to be armed to protect themselves. But it really, I don't look at it as siloed when you look at security. You have to look at the organizational risk and really address it from the top down.
Yeah, for example, the library is going to have a lot of guests, right? According, much different than any other facility probably in town.
Yeah, they are definitely.
The townhouse has guests, but
yeah, and their access to the MinLib network is unique because they've essentially got 2 separate networks there. So definitely some unique situations in different buildings.
And public, access to that network by people being able to use it, which is a great thing. We don't want to change that. It's a lifeline for many people.
Yeah, definitely. But it's always a challenge having that. Openness, but protecting the internal network from any wrongdoing. I'm looking at 11 o'clock sharp, and I know we've tried to end right on time because time is a precious thing for everyone. I want to thank Jason and Stephen for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I think as always, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I think there's a lot of food for thought and future conversations about these topics. So again, thank you very much. Diane, am I missing anything?
Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay. Okay, the League of Women Voters thanks you all, Concord Carlisle, for attending today, and we look forward to our future First Friday. Diane, do you have a ad that you'd like to promote a future First Friday?
The first Friday in May, and it will be on a First Friday this time, is on the open meeting law. And we hope to offer this not just to our league members, but to committee chairs in town. We will publicize this widely because we're going to have someone from the state and a couple people from the state speaking with us about how to manage committee meetings and how to manage discussions. And I think it should be helpful for everyone. So we look forward to that very much.
Great, thank you.
Hey, this was fantastic. Thanks everybody so much. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. It was really great.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
All right. Have a good Friday. Go shovel.